Okay, we're going to multiply this first one here. So negative 2 times 2 is a negative 4, and we can't forget the x. And then there's green here. Negative 2 and negative 1. If you multiply negative 2 times negative 1, you're going to get a positive 2. 2 times 1 is 2, and the negatives cancel out. And that's it. Negative 4x plus 2. Let's take a look at B. There's a negative and a negative x times 3x. So there's a negative times 3, or this is like a negative 1. You can think of this as a negative 1. Maybe I'll put that 1 in there. So negative 1 times negative 1 times 3 is negative 3. And then I've got an x and an x to get me an x squared. And then those ones right there, a negative 1 times a negative 2 is a positive 2. And there's going to be just a single x. Okay. Now let's take a look at C. A negative 3x times an x, a negative 3 times, there's a 1 there, is going to be a negative 3. X times x is going to be x2. There's 2 of them. Again, that's negative 3 times the 1. So it's get me negative 3, and then 2 x's is an x squared. And now I can do this. Negative 3 times 1 is still negative 3, and there's an x. So there we go. And then letter D, I'm going to put a 1 here just to help out. So we'll do this one first. So negative 2 and negative 1, if you multiply those, is a positive 2. x2 and an x gets me an x3. And then I can do this green one here. Negative 2 times negative 3 is a positive 6. And then there's an x squared. There's none over there, so it's just the x squared. And there we have it. Now let's try the next set of questions. So here we go, 2 times 3. 2 times 3 is 6, and then there's an x squared. And then you can go this once. 2 times 2 is 4, and then there's an x. And then you can do this one, 2 times negative 1. 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. And you can see a bit of a pattern here. You can see that it goes x squared, x, no x, x squared, x, no x. So you're going to see a bit of a pattern. All right, I'm going to add for B. I'm going to put a negative 1 out in front. So negative 1 times 3 is negative 3. And then I've got an x and an x2, so a total of 3 of them, x cubed. And then I'm going to go this times this. So I've got negative 1 times 2 is negative 2. And then there's an x and there's an x, so 2 x's or an x squared. And lastly, I've got that times that. So negative 1 times negative 1 is a positive 1, and then I have just an x. So again, if you look for the patterns there, I've got an x squared, an x, and then nothing. And look here, I've got an x3, x2, x1. So they're in descending order. They always drop. So I've got 2 x's, then I've got an x squared, then I've got an x, then I've got none. Here I've got 3, then I've got 2, then I've got 1. So you can just take a look at the exponents, and they should kind of match a descending order if that's what the exponents had up here. So just keep that in mind. They won't be identical, but it should be at least descending. Okay, let's try this one. So here we go. Negative 3, and there's just a 1 out in front, so negative 3 times 1 is negative 3. X times x cubed, there's an x, and there's 3 more for a total of 4. Then I can do this. So negative 3 times negative 3 is a positive 9. And I've got an x and 2 more of them, so I got an x cubed. The math here is very straightforward. You're just multiplying the numbers out in front and then kind of adding up the letters. So negative 3 times positive 3 is going to be a negative 9. And I've got an x and an x for, an x and an x for a total of x squared. And lastly, I got this. So multiply those. -3 times -1 is a +3. There's an x and no more, so just the x. If you look, I got my exponents. I have 4, 3, 2, 1. So they go in a descending order, which is nice because my exponents in the question had 3, 2, 1, none. So there's a descending order for those, so it's going to be a descending order for these. So I'll zoom out, and we've got a few more to do after this, and that will be our last ones for this section before we move on to something slightly more complicated.